Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. I'm glad to have you with me today. And today I have a very special guest. She is the host of Things I Talk About podcast. Her name is Cassandra DeAnn Van Curen. Cassandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Dan. I'm really excited to talk with you tonight.
I'm excited to talk to you as well. And Cassandra, you're involved in some very interesting metaphysical things, but um, things kind of got off to a rocky start for you in your earlier life. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure, of course. I was raised in a religiously abusive home. So, my upbringing was, as you said, a little rough. It was very high control environment where I pretty much kind of didn't have any sense of identity, self. A lot of seeking external validation. There was just a lot of toxicity in the home, and I was quick to move out at the age of 18. And while I would love to say that I sort of got my head on straight, unfortunately, I did not. And so I sort of still lived very much consumed with the fear narrative that I was raised by. I kind of just fumbled through life for quite a while until ultimately I experienced a unexpected, completely out of the blue, spontaneous spiritual awakening at the age of 41. And that completely just propelled me in different directions of where I was going in life, and was this process of really beginning to deconstruct, the trauma and different things I was raised with, redefine my perception of God, come to understand who I was. And here I am. It's been a journey to this point. Yeah.
Uh, what was it that caused your spiritual awakening? Was there a certain event that triggered it?
So it's unusual because a lot of times when you hear about events like that, there's some sort of like tragic accident or a death, of a loved one. But for me, it was literally a solar eclipse. And that was it. I didn't know at the time. I didn't realize that's what it was. But after, I experienced it, and sort of like the next day, people who were around me were like, you're different. You talk different. You feel different. You seem different. Even the relationship at the time, I had been married 20 years, and my husband was like, who are you? It was so drastically different in my essence of who I was. And so I kind of went on this, um, journey to kind of figuring out what happened to me. And it so happens I discovered that there was a very key solar eclipse at that time that took place in a significant place in my astrology chart that kind of just propelled me into the next chapter, I guess you could say, of my life.
Uh, the way you describe it, it almost sounds a little bit like a superhero origin story.
I love that. I love that. That's
I mean,
awesome.
after the eclipse, like how did you feel? Like, did you just wake up the next day and it was just like poof, like a light bulb went off in your head?
Yeah, it was like I began to like talk about things and understand things related to astrology that like I never studied or entertained before. It was just like information was being channeled and coming out of me that with this enthusiasm. And that's one thing I'll definitely say about a spiritual awakening is that in the beginning, it is like being a kid in a candy shop. Like it is so exciting, full of potential. Everything is magical and rainbows and all the beautiful things. And that phase is wonderful. It is short lived, because after you kind of get through that, next comes like a lot of deeper darker, more complicated healing work that takes place. So yeah, I felt freaking incredible though. Like I just felt full of life and vitality and personality, which was saying a lot because my personality, how I show up now in the world, yeah, that was not who I was. I wanted to be the wallflower. I wanted to blend in. I didn't want to be noticed or speak out or speak up. And so it kind of really opened this whole other side of myself.
And how many years ago was that, the eclipse?
Only 3 years. Actually, it'll be 3 years, June 9th, coming up here in a couple weeks. So yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, so you've been on a wild ride so far. How you mentioned the religious abuse. How has your I guess your perception of religion changed over the years, if at all?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that question because I was raised, the household was very fear minded. I mean, we grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home. So basically, the essence of the Bible was taken very, very literally. And my mother was very consumed with topics of like demon possession, demonic possession, things along that lines. So we heard a lot about the devil, and it was, you didn't really hear much about God. Like one of my mom's favorite things to say was like, you're either hot or cold or God spits you out, and there was just never this like acceptable feeling. I never felt like I was achieving enough, being enough, worthy enough. And so, it was something that I felt like my version of religion was very much concerned with like those darker aspects. And so I was like, okay, something obviously completely unusual and magical happened to me. How does that add up to how I was raised? So I started to explore it. Now, where I landed was, first off, it was easy for me to believe in reincarnation. It was just like, it took no convincing, that really resonated. When it came to the topic of God, I went on this journey of understanding religions. We were very, very, very sheltered. And so I can still remember one of the first things was discovering that there was like 2000 years of like Hinduism and other religions that came from Christianity and came before Christianity. And it was like, I always thought it was just Christianity and that was it, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess if y'all came first, like anything else that would come after would be false gods. And according to how I was raised. But then I was like, hold the phone. You're telling me there was 2000 years of all of this other culture and beliefs before this even came into the picture. So I really began to research the different religions and kind of find what felt good. For me, I do tend to gravitate towards more of like a non-dualistic approach of like, I don't really believe there is a right or wrong. And I believe in God's source universe. I believe there are no coincidences, and I believe that life happens for us. I feel more of a connection to the concept of a God than I ever did in religion. I feel supported. I feel nurtured. I feel provided for. And that is saying a lot to me. And I do believe in Jesus. I just think that his story kind of got a little distorted. I see him more as a ascended master, that his reasonings and his messages of what he was sharing were kind of taken into the hands of patriarchy and distorted for political purposes. So that's where I landed.
All right, very cool. Now, Cassandra, um, can you tell me what exactly is a human design reader?
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, after my awakening, I was very interested in astrology and, to kind of discover what everything was. And that led me to an astrologer that I followed, and she ended up becoming a human design reader. And it was at first when I kind of came across it, I wasn't that interested. But one thing I learned is when the universe wants you to learn something, it'll keep kind of putting it in front of you. So eventually I was like, okay, fine. I'll look into this design thing. And oh my gosh, like I completely fell in love. I pulled up my chart and it's complicated. Like you look at it and there's lots of symbols and shapes and numbers and all sorts of details. And I was like, oh, I want to know what all of this means. And I just fell in love with it and began this process of studying. And it was a very pivotal point in my awakening in discovering who I am and coming to terms with my expression of self. So if I was to define human design, there's formal definitions that say, it's a modality in which it uses astrology, the Hindu chakra system, Kabbalah tree of life, and the Chinese I Ching, mixes that with some like quantum physics language and biochemistry and, all of these things, and sort of mixes them all up and comes out with a chart that is called your body graph. Now, how I would personally describe it is it is our light signature. It's the essence of our energy signature, our aura, who we are. It has the potential to show us in life our essence of who we are, kind of how we're embodying that. It can show you some of your greatest challenges and where your gift potentials are, what you're meant to embody. And it helps you understand how your energy interacts with the energy around you through different people and how those expressions play out. So it is an amazing tool for self-discovery and in understanding your position, your role, what you're here to share with the world. And so one of the things I loved that I got the most out of was I had always been multi-passionate. I have multiple different interests, and that was an area of my life I felt a little sensitive about. I felt like there was this stereotypical image of what a responsible adult would look like, and I never fit in that box. And when I discovered my human design chart, I am what's called a manifesting generator, which essentially means that my path is not meant to be linear in life. I am meant to pursue all the different interests and things that I love. My energy is fast. I get things done quick. And when I allow myself to bounce into the things that interest me, I absorb them quickly. And another thing will come along, and eventually later in life these pieces all come together and form like a beautiful puzzle. And it was so empowering. I was like, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with me, like this is who I am. And it's just felt incredible.
How does the process work exactly? Like if someone approaches you and says, "Hey, you know, can you read my design?" Like what do they give you and like what do you do with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So I actually have on my website a link where you can pull a free human design chart. So to pull your chart, you would just need your date of birth, the time of birth, and location. So you just plug in that information and it pulls out the human design chart. I know on my podcast, I talk a lot. I've got multiple episodes that kind of and on YouTube about like how to sort of get started with navigating that. Of course, I offer readings too, but if you kind of just want to play with it, dip your toe in the water, like get the free chart, go check out my podcast. And that's an excellent way to get started.
Okay. And your website is CassandraDeAnn.com?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned you also have a YouTube channel?
I do, which is Cassandra DeAnn as well.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Um, what can you tell us about Gene Keys? I see that you're a certified Gene Keys guide.
Yeah. So Gene Keys was sort of the next step for me in human design. I feel like going back to the unusual circumstances of my awakening again, it's like I absorbed the information quickly. I felt like it was something almost that was a part of me that just had to be like tapped into, resurfaced. So once I completed my certification, I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to know more. So Gene Keys is sort of a different modality, but it utilizes the same information. Um, it has a more transcendent, deeper nature to it, though. That's where most of my where human design was how I discovered who I was. Gene Keys was how I healed the things that needed to be addressed. And so the Gene Keys focuses more on the I Ching, which I love the I Ching. And in the I Ching, there are 64 hexagrams, which are various different expressions to be connected to the evolutionary process of the human journey. So each one of these numbers has some sort of theme or significance. For example, the hexagram 1 is the fullest expression of yang energy. So when we're looking at that, you look at the yang expression of like creative spark, wanting to bring something new, having that ambition of forward motion. So when you have that number, those are a few of the characteristics associated with it. So the Gene Keys takes these hexagrams of the I Ching and it applies different expressions. So it applies what's called a shadow, a gift, and a city. And so it's like this transformative journey that we go through. And the city would be the highest, most evolved expression of that energy. So it's mystical and magical and unique. And so when we understand that we all experience these different energies, the 64 hexagrams, based on how the astrology is being activated, because that is a big part of, Gene Keys and human design, we can sort of look at how that energy is playing out in our life. So it's a good time for self-reflection. So like one of the shadows of the one I gave example of is melancholy. So if you're feeling if the astrology is activating this gate, which it does for approximately 5 to 6 days, where collectively we all feel that energy. So if you look at it and you're like, man, I can't pull myself together. I just feel I'm uninspired. Like you feel that melancholy. You can look at it and say, okay, what's going on in my life right now? It gives you an opportunity to self-reflect and find ways in which, how can you come back into your body? How can you detach from expectations and maybe tap into your creative side, and play in a more hermit type way that's not so outwardly focused? Or maybe it's you just need that slow time because it's polarity. It's you got to have the dark to have the light, and embracing that and saying, okay, I know I'm feeling this way. I know it's temporary. It's going to pass. So you can self-reflect and work on things through understanding those energies. And that is one of the many different options of ways you can work with the Gene Keys. But there are so many. Yeah.
So the Gene Keys and the human design, what was your introduction to them? I guess, did you find out about them from a friend, and before the eclipse, had you ever even heard of them?
No, I didn't. I never considered anything, it's like that was of the devil, that was sinful, so I did not entertain any of that. So I was, everything just felt divinely guided because my love for astrology brought me to human design. My love for human design brought me to the Gene Keys. And so it was sort of just this natural evolving process that sort of felt divinely guided.
Okay. What can you tell me about the Akashic Records?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, now we're getting in real deep. So, when I had my spiritual awakening, one of the things that I did in the beginning, because what is so funny is, especially when you look at the things I do and the information I share with people, I am very logical. Like, I am actually so logical. And so, it was interesting when I had this awakening experience because I was like, what do I do with this? Like, literally, what do I do with this? And so I signed up for a program with an intuitive, like a coaching program. It ended up being 9 months long. And in this program, I began to learn different things. And it was perfect for a very skeptical mind because it's one thing to kind of connect to intuition, because when you start to connect to your intuition, which is essentially just your senses, it's like intuitively, it's like the person that can cook without a recipe and know what it tastes like. That's an example. When you walk into the room after someone had an argument and you weren't there, but you feel like something is just off. We all have those intuitive senses. So when you awaken and these things start to come online, it's like a muscle that you kind of work. And so, reading the Akashic Records, you definitely have to have a firm foundation of your intuition. So I started off in this group, and it was so frustrating for me at first because I kept saying things like, I know I'm not crazy, because like I would have my intuition come back on and I'm like, I need a logical explanation, which I didn't have at first. But there's something about being in a group of other individuals and doing practices and hearing or feeling things and being scared to say anything, but yet listening as every person in the room is literally saying the same thing. And so for the skeptical mind, it was magical. It was like, okay, there's something to this. I'm not crazy. And so over time, I began to open up more and more, which for me, my strongest gift is clairaudience, which means I don't really have that constant running monologue internally. I can sit and be silent, and it is silent. And my gift is clairaudience. So all of a sudden, I have voice now coming online, speaking to me things that I don't know anything about. And so it took some getting used to. But as I grew into these gifts and felt more connected, I felt drawn to reading the Akashic Records. And the Akashic Records is basically, if you look at it from like a quantum physics perspective, it's like that matter, that particle, that material, that space in which holds past, present, future, where it's like timeless. Everything is held within that frequency. I look at it as a frequency. So when you're reading the Akashic Records, you're intuitively connecting to God's source universe and connecting to that frequency of the Akashic Records so that you can then in return share very rich, deep information. This is the easiest way to understand it. If you go to a psychic reader, you're getting a reading that they're going to be connecting to your higher self, maybe your guides, possibly your ancestors, depending on the person. If you go to a medium, they're going to be connecting more to you, the loved ones who have passed, the ghost or your grandfather, things like that. That energy isn't always as higher frequency. Like they might not be the one to direct you. You don't necessarily might not want your grandpa, telling you how you should be living your life. You might want more of your higher self or the angels or guides. And then when you go to Akashic, what you're doing is you're then tapping more into a field of information so you can get details on past lives, your soul's journey. You can read the soul. So one is going to give guidance, one is going to, your grandpa's going to tell you he's doing okay, and then the Akashic records are going to be like, okay, you had this past life where you experienced this, which is now playing out here, and this is your guidance. So it's got a lot more depth to it. I hope that
And
helps.
yes, and just to be clear, this is like you mentioned the medium and the psychic. So this is like something that you're tapping into mentally, because when I hear like the phrase Akashic Records, I'm thinking of like a file cabinet or something that you're
Yeah.
flipping through.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny because there's so many different ways to actually like anchor or tune into that frequency, and everybody does it different. And I love that you mentioned that, because a lot of Akashic Records readers who are more visual, they will have more of a visual experience of seeing a big library or a file cabinet, and tapping in that way. So yeah, that's fun.
And this isn't just something that you do on yourself, you can do it for other people too.
It's for anything, yourself and others. And it's pretty incredible. I One of my favorite things in reading the Akashic records has actually recently been relationships, because I feel like so many of us can relate to circumstances in which we'll have moments in a relationship where you'll say something and they'll say, well, why did you say I this or that? And you kind of scratch your head and you're like, how did they get that? Like, where did that come from? Like, how can they be so far off from what I just said? And what's interesting is when you go into the Akashic records and you read the past lives that they shared together, you'll often find the answer. You'll find that there was some sort of circumstance or theme that is influencing the present life, in which they're sort of playing out those same feelings that they're trying to work through. And so by understanding these lives and these intricate details of one another, you're able to look and say, oh, okay, now I get it. So one person can be more empathetic and understanding, and the other person can have more clarity, to what's going on and how to work with that. So it's really, I think that understanding your past lives is so beneficial in healing, evolving, growing, which is why I feel like we're here.
So going back to what I said earlier about how your experience sounded like a superhero origin story, with the Akashic records, are you like, how do you read people? Do you like put your hands on their head and like
I
like absorb
love
stuff from them?
it. Yeah.
Are you absorbing
Oh,
knowledge from them?
yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. That's so funny. So yeah, no, it is actually remotely done. I mean, I can do it in person as well, but you're connecting energetically to their soul. So for me, like I said earlier, everybody does it different. Because my particular gifts are, I am very, very, very sensitive to energy. So for me, I have the guidance. There's sort of like intentions that you place, calling upon, I call upon a certain angel for help every time I connect. So it's like just anchoring that frequency, tuning into it. And I can feel in my body when I have tapped in. And it's interesting because as I'm reading, also I'm clairsentient. So, and feeling, I have a lot of feeling as well, that will come through. So I've read and I will feel the essence of their soul and the feelings they have. And sometimes it can be very emotional. And the second I disconnect or close out for the records, it disappears. Like it's completely gone. It's like this switch on, switch off essence. And so, yeah, it's done remotely and just energetically through connecting on a soul level.
Does it have to be um, like a willing thing, or can you just do it to like a random
Yes.
person?
No, yeah. There's a lot of like different boundaries and things that go along with it, which I've actually been trained through the first intuitive that I mentioned, the program I did, which was a 9-month program. And I've also been trained as well through, I'm also a certified galactic astrologer. And so part of reading the galactic records is being trained on how to read the Akashic records. And so there are a lot of intention on how you ask questions, getting permission, the process of connection. There's definitely a lot there to consider. So yes, I do have, when people book me, I kind of have right in there that says, okay, here's a little idea of an intention for you to kind of place, or a prayer to pray before we have our session, to grant me access for the intention of reading your records for your highest good. So yeah.
Okay. This might sound like a weird question, but so we've talked about, the Akashic records. We talked about human design. Um, we talked about the gene keys. Are Can any of these things be done on like other animals?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, it's interesting because that is not something I have used personally. But yes, specifically, I know human design. The software I use actually has the ability to put in your pet's birth information and pull up their personality. So absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's inspiring. I'm a crazy cat person, so I might have to play around with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
um, all right, Cassandra. So, would you like to share your thoughts, if any, on ETs?
Oh, how much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. um, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that has been an interesting journey for me that started honestly from the very beginning of my soul journey. Like literally a month into my spiritual awakening, I got an Akashic Records reading from someone. And in the reading, they shared my soul origins, and which your soul origins is essentially like the beginning, the essence of the very first experience or beginning of your soul's journey. And she told me what mine was. She told me to go purchase Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon and the 12th Planet by Zachariah Stitchin. And she says, read about these things and don't be frightened, you know? And so I got the books and I wasn't ready. Like I put them aside. And then it was like time went by, and then I got another Akashic Records reading, and they're like, oh, by the way, your soul origins, which for me is called the Blueprinters, which it's a long story. But essentially, yes, it's not earth based by no means. And so, someone else said, oh, your soul origins is the Blueprinters. And so that was the second time someone brought it up. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should learn a little bit more about this. But even at that, it wasn't until October of last year when I finally stumbled upon someone, and that was an astrologer, and I just was in love with how they read, and I found out it was called galactic astrology. And so I dove in headfirst into that journey. So yes, all the things, I believe all the things. um Never entertained them before, with my religious upbringing. I mean, we didn't even believe in dinosaurs. We were told that dinosaurs were like of the devil and they didn't really exist. That was just to like confuse the whole story of creation, and the fossils in the museums weren't real, and, dinosaurs aren't real. So, I mean, aliens, if dinosaurs aren't even real, I mean, definitely not entertaining ETs. And so, but yeah, so what I joke because I have a son who's 16 years old, and we're at the point we're very open in my household, and I can still remember he said, "Hey mom, what'd you do today?" I was like, "Oh, I talked to the aliens." And so what I do with my work in galactic astrology is literally reading past lives through the Akashic records that share lives that people have had on other planets and through other star races or, ET races. And it is insanely accurate and has been very, very transformative to a lot of people. So, yeah, I could definitely talk about the whole alien thing, ET thing for a while.
I always think it's interesting when someone says that they don't believe in ETs at all, because I mean, there's like so many different planets out there. I
Yes.
mean, there's got to be some life out there, or
Yes.
probably it's I don't
Yeah.
know, like
Mm-hmm.
do you know of like, I guess, like specific races of ETs?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that is part of being trained in galactic astrology. We are actually taught, which very much resonates with me, the story of our creation, and our engagement with ET races. So like I mentioned earlier, I was told to get the book, The 12th Planet by Zachariah Stitchin, that goes into the Anunnaki, which, I am someone that believes that our DNA, our human DNA, we have been genetically assisted through ET races, the Anunnaki, which comes from the Sirius, Sirius C, I believe, because there's three Sirius stars. But they come from Sirius, and have influenced the early history. When you study like ancient Sumer, that stuff just makes me get excited, because you can see the Anunnaki throughout the Sumer history and the texts and things that were shared. So, we're taught on the history, the beginning of creation, which I mentioned earlier that I was a blueprinter. Essentially, the concept is in the beginning, we had this like God source intelligence of all things, and it had the powerful thought of, I wonder what it would be like to know myself. And then with that, you had like the Big Bang or the explosion or the fragmentation where things began to split off. Well, the first splits in that process were larger group consciousness before we sort of put the matrix in play to have the I expression of incarnation. And so the blueprinters were one of many different energy consciousnesses that were a part of creating the experience of what we know now. So there are themes that when I read for souls that are blueprinters, which are a little rare, there are themes in our lives that are consistent, that we are here to, have different missions or parts of the collective and personal journeys that, we all have in common. And then the first incarnations, the first physical humanoid incarnations would be the Lyrans that came from the Lyra constellation. So those are very much like the expression earlier of the I Ching when I mentioned the hexagram of one, the Yang. They were bold. There was 4 different genetic strands. Some were more humanoid looking. One was a little more feline. Which goes into ancient Egypt, and some of the different things associated there with that and the different galactic races being, tied into that storyline. But yeah, there's lots of talk about grays, abductions, all of it, you name it. Yeah, I've done a lot of research.
I was just gonna ask you about the Greys because I think, the average person when they think of ETs, whether they believe in them or not, the first thing that
Yeah.
pops into their mind is probably the Greys.
Right.
But
Well, yeah, which is interesting because, like, keeping this as brief as possible, I mentioned the Lyrans. Well, over time, that Lyran energy had a polarization where there began to be a separation of two different expressions. And half of the, a majority of the ETs in that sense, started to disagree with how the Lyrans were expressing themselves. They went more yin. And so in doing so, they went off to another star, Vega, in the Lyran constellation, and they began to be more of what you could say the extreme side of the feminine. They were very internal focused, and they had this desire to be disciplined and to, have this intense spiritual practice. Well, the thought with that is like, well, if we didn't have to deal with this emotional side of ourselves, we could have a closer connection to God. So they began to genetically manipulate themselves to take out that essence. Well, what happened is, as a result, over a very, very long time, they became, when you take that emotional piece out, they became more mentally oriented. They became a very advanced society. Because of this, there was a lot of things that happened, including toxicity of the planet. They were forced to go underground where, they lived and adapted to survival. They became sterile, couldn't have children, couldn't reproduce. Their line was threatened. Their body changed. They began losing their hair. Their skin turned dull, and their eyes became larger to adjust to the lighting. And there you have the grays.
wow, that's
So,
awesome. Oh, is there like I guess a certain danger that comes with ETs? Because I mean, just like humans, are there ones with good intentions and ones with bad intentions?
that is a great question. So, I would say the answer to that is yes. There's always going to be polarity. That said, I also feel like nothing happens without our soul's agreement and acceptance. So, do I feel like we are victim to different, ETs? I do not. I personally do not. I believe that the people that have different experiences, that there's reasonings, there's soul contracts on soul levels, because at the end of the day, ETs are just consciousness experiencing life just like we are. They've just been doing it a whole lot longer than we've been doing it here on Earth. So there is advanced, species. There are species that may be advanced but want nothing to do with us, or, care about anything. And there are species that are still younger consciousness working through, polarity. So I think it's always good to be mindful of that. I don't ever agree in looking at it from a perspective of like, oh, the ETs are here to save us or destroy us. I don't play either side of that. I do, however, feel like consciously, as evolving as a species, that it is essential that we are going to be experiencing more public, and obvious contact experiences that are meant to sort of propel us forward. It's a little scary because that idea is going to be a little questionable to religious standards, to gas and petroleum, and like so many different things that's going to shake our what we know. But I think it's intentional for a reason, and that we will see a point. My estimate is fair sooner rather than later, where we're going to be having more obvious contact experiences. Yeah.
What is a star seed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So earlier when I talked about, like, for example, my soul origins being the blueprinter. So a star seed is essentially the concept of, I personally believe that we all are star seeds. So I use the term star seeds because it's easy to identify for people that are new to the concept of ETs and, different, soul journeys. But generally, if someone resonates with the term star seed, they resonate with the concept of having a life or soul origin that took place outside of this earth experience. So it's like people can say, oh, I'm a Palladian star seed, or I'm an Andromedan star seed. And so that would be, I have had, my soul has either originated or had lives on this other star, and has also incarnated here on this planet, this Mother Gaia, experience, and resonates with that as well. I have not personally, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I have not personally stumbled upon in my work through galactic astrology yet anyone who did not have one life somewhere outside of this earth. I have not had early souls who have not incarnated anywhere but this planet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Cassandra, would you like to tell us a little bit about your podcast, things I talk about?
Yeah, sure. So if I said anything, in all of this that interests you, definitely go check out my podcast. It's things I talk about, and these are all things I talk about. Um, hence the name. So spirituality, anything metaphysical, anything to improve your understanding of who you are, to embody your authentic expression, because I feel like that is the essential work, is feeling like we all can give ourselves permission to fully embody who we are. And when we do that, I feel like all the other gunk, like jealousy and anger and expectations, kind of falls away, because we feel like we're okay. We have permission to be who we are. And when you embody that, life gets freaking exciting, and you feel good, things come together for you. And I feel like with that, the world would feel much different, when we do those things. So those are some of the things that I talk about on my podcast.
Okay. Now, the eclipse just happened 3 years ago, and you've had a lot of stuff come your way since then. Um, at any point, have you ever found it to be like scary at all?
Oh, man. Well, Dan, if I'm being honest, so the going back to astrology, and I believe everything happens for a reason. And so, yes, I feel like I've been propelled into challenging journeys, but I do feel, as I said, supported by the universe. It is not always easy. For example, astrology wise, the signs of Libra and Aries are getting hit often. The north nodes are there, and we just finished the spring eclipse season, and now we're going to be going into the fall eclipse season. And with that, I have had a second unexpected awakening recently in the month of April during my birthday. The eclipse took place on a very significant place on my exact sun sign. And with that came realizations in my life, including a recent divorce. So it is not always easy. That said, if when I share with individuals the story of how this experience has played out, it's remarkable how synchronicity has just like followed through every step. It's nothing like what society says the experience should look like. I feel like if there was someone that could teach you how to go through these things, like, we could do that, And so even though it's hard, it's challenging, the universe, I do feel like, it's not out to get you. It's never going to be, you know, it doesn't spank you. You know what I mean? It's like what happens is to put you on the path for your highest good. The problem is society. We have expectations. This is what a good person looks like. This is what a relationship looks like. This is what a successful person looks like. Now, those things the universe don't care about. As a matter of fact, it's going to do anything and everything to shake all of that up. And I feel like that is exactly where we're at right now. There are a lot of people's lives who are being shooken and trying to evolve their consciousness to see outside of the limitation of this is the only way it should be. So yeah, it can be scary. Like it can be hard. There have been very challenging things that I've had to go through. But here's the thing. If we don't address them, if we don't deal with them, they will continue to come and bite us. They will continue to come back and knock us against the head. It's like the relationship that you're in and it ends terribly, and then you go in another and you're like, who is this person? I've done this already. Like it's just repeating because that is how it works. It will continue to do it because the essence of this existence is expansion, evolution, and growth. We are simply consciousness here to expand, evolve, and grow. And so we cannot be stagnant. We cannot stay still. We cannot reach some fictionary finish line that we've then arrived. You know, no, life is always going to be propelling us forward. And that's scary because it doesn't feel secure. So,
Now, what do you like to do to as decompress? What do
yeah.
you enjoy doing in your spare time?
That's a great question. So, meditation has been my saving grace through all of this. I do have a personal practice of meditation that can look different for everybody. For me, because like I said, I don't have that inner monologue. All I need to do is put on some good music and zone out, and I'm there. Um, but there are so many different practices you can have to help. For me, meditation has been a big one. I would suggest that for anybody looking for something to help them with decompression or to balance again or to ground. I also love spending time in nature, like bare feet in the grass. I find that helps me as well decompress and ground. But I think that for anybody that would be listening and going through challenging, like we said, because some of it is hard, keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Do what you can do. I do, as I said, firmly believe the universe supports us. So when we have that intention we set and we're like, okay, you're sitting there, maybe you're outside. You're like, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but here I am. The universe will help. Like it will show up. And it's just a matter of taking that first step in some capacity to connect with yourself. And, we're so used to being externally focused and distracting or busying or hustling, so when you take those moments, even when you're driving in the car and you're at a stoplight, instead of like getting pissed off thinking, oh, this traffic, take 3 deep breaths, just like breathe in, just come into how your vessel is feeling and try to think of something that you've enjoyed during the day or looking forward to, like, I'm really going to enjoy getting that coffee later this afternoon. That's all sometimes it takes. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Cassandra, this has been a fantastic conversation. The website is CassandraDeAnn.com. The podcast is Things I Talk About. And do you have any social media links you'd like to throw out there that you like to interact with people on?
Um, they can try to check me out on Instagram. I try to post there. I am Cassandra DeAnn. So yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure I link that in the description for this
Awesome.
episode. And Cassandra, thank you so much. This has really been fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and thank everyone for listening to this. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.